Okay, so good morning, everyone. Today, our class is about the war poets in the 20th century English or British literature. So today we are going to discuss three writers. The first one is Wilfred Owen. The second is Robert Brooks, and the third one is Sage Sassoon. But before we start talking about these poets, let me just give you an introduction about the First World War and its significance in its influence on the 20th century English and world literature in general. First of all, the First World War uh, took place in 1914 and ended in 1918, and this means that the war took 4 years to end, which was very long war, to be honest. People at the beginning thought that the war will take just months and then it would finish, sorry. But the war did not, finish within months, and it took 4 years to finish, which was very devastating for Europe and the whole world. Now, the influence of the First World War on literature was that there are certain traditional and moral conceptions that people were interested in, okay? But the First World War shook these, traditional things. And I'll explain this to you here in the text that I'll put here. First of all, we said that the war, okay, before the war, okay? The features, first of all, there were a widespread sense of nationalism, patriotism, and heroism. Okay, that's before the war. So people at that time believed that they should fight for their countries, and they have to be patriotic, and they have to express their heroic deeds, etc. and etc. So all these characteristics were before the war. And also war and fighting in the war, here, let's write it here, fighting in the war meant glory and bravery. So once you return back from the war, people will welcome you and will hail you with flowers, and they will call you a hero, etc., etc. So all these beautiful images, about before the war were widespread and were prevalent in the 20th century before the First World War. But after the war, okay, what happened? Okay, so many soldiers died, and many cities were destroyed, okay? And this huge massacre and the huge destruction of the cities, led soldiers to the following. Soldiers started to believe in the traditional concept of patriotism and heroism. What does that mean? It means that soldiers no longer believe in heroism and patriotism, because simply the war took 4 years, and that was very long time, okay? And this led soldiers to disbelieve and to reject the idea of patriotism and heroism. There is no heroism in fighting, for example, mustard gas. Something that you cannot be a hero to fight a gas, okay? Gas is so lethal and can kill you in seconds if you inhale. So there's no such a thing as heroic deeds with facing and encountering gas, for example. There were also machine guns, guns that kill or you know, shoot hundreds of bullets at the same time. Okay, you can't deal with them. And there were also boot traps, boot traps, traps. These are, you know, sort of, you know, mines that explodes when you step on them. These are called boot traps. And what is the point of being heroic if you cannot, you know, if you cannot deal with these, you know, things such as mustard gas, machine guns, boot traps, etc. So all these things, you know, change the perception of the war. That the war does not lead to glory. The war does not lead to patriotism. Does not lead to heroism. But war leads to what? Here's the thing that the war leads to. The war leads to fear. Leads to sleeplessness. Leads to nightmares. Leads to physical maim or deformation. Okay, so these are the kinds of things that you can experience in the war. Okay, so now we will discuss the war poets, and we'll see how the war before and how the war after, you know, affect literature in the 20th century. Now, I would suggest that we start with the second poet, okay? The second poet is Robert Brooke. Why I would like to start with Robert Brooke? Simply because his poetry is more of a before war literature, meaning that he views literature, views war as something glorious, as something heroic, as something positive. And he talks positively about England and how his blood will be, you know, English, and how his blood will be in different countries because he represents his country. Okay, now let me read the biography of Robert Brooks. Robert Brooke was born in 1887 and died in 1915. He also was fond of the works of the Romantic poets. He attended Cambridge University, where he met and befriended members of Bloomsbury's group, whose literature was an important piece of British modernism. Brooke was commissioned into the Royal Navy, but in 1915, he died of sepsis on board hospital ship. He's buried on the Greek island of Skyros. So simply, he died, you know, in the first year of the war, okay, let me just go back to the screen here. So simply he died in okay, where is that? Annotate, okay, draw. Yeah, here. So he died in 1915, and this is very significant because simply he did not experience a long period of time fighting in the war. And that's why the war in his poetry was something positive, and it expresses patriotism. Now look at the poet here, the poem here, and let's read it carefully. The soldier, he said, if I should die, think only this of me, that there is some corner of a foreign field that is forever England, and there shall be in that rich earth a rich dust concealed. So simply he said that here in these 4 lines, that if he dies here, okay, if he dies, where is that? If he dies, his body will be buried in a foreign field. And that's why, you know, when he died, he was buried in Greece, okay? And when his body is buried in a foreign field, it means that England has part or has a piece in another country or in another foreign country, which he thinks this is a kind of a privilege or a blessed thing, that his body is buried in a foreign country. So simply he is very interested and enthusiastic about war, and that if he dies in the war, his body will represent England in a foreign country. Okay, and that's why he said, in that rich earth, a richer dust concealed. Dust here refers to his body, you know, because, you know, when someone dies, what happened to his body? His body becomes into dust, right? And this dust will be concealed, like will be buried as a dead body. And that's why, you know, he said that my body will be concealed in that country. Again, this is a kind of a glorious, heroic, bombastic, nationalistic poem that expresses glory and patriotism about England. But that's not the case after the war. A dust here means his body. A dust whom England bore, it means that because he's from England, shaped, made aware, gave once he flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England's breathing English air, washed by the rivers, blessed by the son of home. Okay, he's now talking about England, that he was son of England. He was born in England. He was shaped in England. And he's like a flower, okay? And he loves nature there. He loves its flower, etc. And also he breathed the English air. It means that he's all English, okay? He was created in England and washed by the rivers and blessed by the son of home. So simply he's completely English. And think this heart all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind, no less, gives somewhere back to the thoughts of England given. So again, here he goes back to the idea that England, 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 he is a soldier who represent England in the war, and he is very happy, patriotic, nationalistic, expresses his happiness for fighting for the English, for England. Her sights and sounds, dreams happy as her days. And here again, he's talking about England. And laughter, learned of friends, and gentleness, in heart at peace under English heaven. So this is very interesting because this poem seems to be naive, simple, and does not represent the reality of the war, because it represents the war as something positive, as soldier, you know, being happy and willing to die for the sake of their countries and for patriotic reason. Now, if we go to the first poet, okay, we will find another totally different, you know, image here. Now, the second poet that we are going to discuss is Wilfred Owen. Now, see the difference between the first poet and the second poet. Okay. Now, Wilfred Owen is or was born in 1893 and died in 1918, and this is the last year of the war, by the way. Okay, Wilfred Owen was born in Shropshire, a rural area of England. He was interested in poetry, particularly Keats and other romantic poets. He wrote poetry in his teens. When he failed to be admitted to college, he moved to France to work as an English language tutor. After World War I began, he moved back to England to enlist. In 1917, he was diagnosed with what was then called shell shock, and we will talk about shell shock, and sent to Craig Lockhart Hospital in Scotland for treatment. There he met Siegfried Sassoon. Both poets wrote some of the most well-known poetry while there. Owen returned to the front in the fall of 1918, won the Military Cross, and just days before the war ended was killed in a battle. His family received the news of his death in the midst of celebration on November 11, Armistice Day in 1918. So simply here, what this biography tells us about this poet is that this poet, you know, participated in the war for a long time, unlike Brooke, who just, you know, was in the war for almost a year. Now, Wilfred Owen died in 1918, which means that he experienced and he had a first-hand experience in the war for almost 4 years, and he died in the last year of the war, okay? And that's why, you know, the war is not positive, is not patriotic, is not nationalistic as Robert Brooke showed us. The war is very terrible and horrible and scary. And here the word shell shock means when someone, you know, is exposed to death, to shells and explosions, there is a shock that took place, and the shock leads to psychological problems. So simply shell shock here refers to what? The psychological effect Wait a minute, let me just, yeah, here. The psychological effect of the war on soldiers. Okay, okay, that's all. So now we go back to our, highlights. Okay. Um, let's read the poem. De luce et decorum est. De luce et decorum est by Wilfred Owen. This is very interesting title because this title means something here. The Latin phrase from work by Homer may be translated, and here's the translation of this title, the Roman title. It is sweet and right to die for one's country. It means that it is very nice and it's very patriotic to die for your country, okay? But that's the title of the poem, but what is in the poem is something opposite. So he's making fun of this title, that it is honorable and it is patriotic to die for your country. We will see how this, is different from the poem itself. Juxtaposed against the illusion of war as a glorious adventure, Owen paints the horror of war reality. So simply, he shows the war as not glorious. That war is not glorious. War is terrible. War is scary. And we will see here the poem. Okay. Bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and toward our distant rest began to trudge. Here in the first 4 lines, he talks about how the soldiers look like in the war. First of all, they are bent double like old beggars under sacks. Here, this is an image, if you see the beggars, the people who ask for money, they always, when they walk, you feel like, they are bent double, like, they don't have a straight back because they are carrying a sack under their backs. And that's the soldiers, because the soldiers walk and they have a lot of things on their backs and they walk bent double, okay? Because they are like old beggars. They are walking with heavy weights. Knock-kneed, coughing like hags. So they are coughing, okay, like old women, because hag here means old women. So they cough like old women, okay? They cough like old women and curse through the sludge. And they also curse through the mud, because in the war they were walking through the mud, and the mud is very hard to walk into. And that's why, they are not in a very positive situation simply here. Okay, so they are bending double, that they cannot, carry the stuff that they have like beggars. And they also cough like hags or cough like old women as they walk into the sludge. But while they are walking slowly, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs. So haunting flares here, he refers to the light that is made by the German, flares. Flares here means, okay, in the First World War, when the Germans used to throw mustard gas, okay, when they used to throw mustard gas, اللي هو يعني اللي هو الغاز اللي هو السام، الغاز السام, okay, they used to throw it, but before they throw it, they throw flares, means like, they throw lights in the sky that can light the area and they can see where soldiers are, and then they throw the mustard gas. So the haunting flares means that the Germans are, throwing gas on soldiers, okay? So till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and toward our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. So because men are very tired, they are very tired that they are marching sleep. Okay, men are marching, sorry, are marching sleep. Men are marching sleep because simply they are tired. Many had lost their boots, so they are walking barefoot. They don't have boots to walk on, and but limped on, bloodshed, and they are in a very bad situation here. They are limping, like, you know, they are not walking like in a right way. A limped person, when you lose your feet, okay, you do not walk, you know, in a right way because you have a lost feet. That's or lost leg. That's why you are called a limbed person. So they are limbed on, bloodshot, all went lame and all blind. See that all these soldiers are blind because simply the war is so terrible that they are marching asleep, okay? And they are all blind. This is a very terrible depiction of the war. Now compare this depiction with the previous poem. They are totally different, right? Drunk with fatigue. Fatigue here means too much tiredness. They are very tired, deaf even to the hoots. And they are deaf, they cannot hear anything simply because when you experience and when you encounter many explosions and many sounds, you become deaf, you cannot hear that explosion, okay? So deaf even to the hoots of tired, outstripped 5'9" that dropped behind. Outstrip 5'9" here, it talks about some of the weapons, you know, a weapon used in the First World War, 5'9". And then this is the moment here, the climax here. Gas, gas, quick boys, gas. Now here, if you remember, I talked about the German mustard gas, which can kill you in seconds. Gas يعني كان في اللي هو الغاز الماستر gas كان يقتل على السريع. Now we have one, the speaker says, gas, gas, quick boys. An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. Meaning that whenever you have gas, okay, there are helmets, okay, that you have to put in your head to protect yourself from the gas. If you don't put this helmet on your head, you will die, okay? But here's the problem. One of these soldiers was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. One soldier has a problem putting his helmet on his head, so to protect himself from gas. And what happened? Dim through the misty veins and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him droning. And now he said that because this man could not put the helmet on his head, the gas killed him. And he tried to show or to use a metaphor of droning, like as if he is in the open sea and this guy is droning, because when you smell the gas or the mustard gas, you will die slowly as if you are droning, okay? And that's very terrible. And by the way, the color of the gas, the German gas is green. So you can see a green, gas that is coming to you. If you inhale this green gas, you will die quickly. And then now the soldier here, the speaker, talking about how this image haunted him and chased him when he came back home in his dreams. In all my dreams, before my helpless side, he plunges at me. Plunges here, he refers to the soldier who dies. He plunges at me, guttering, choking, droning. These are the descriptions of the soldiers when he died, that he guttered, choked, and droned, meaning that he died, okay? If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his hanging face like a devil sick of sin. So here he shows how this soldier is taken to the in the ambulance, but he's already dead. Okay, so he said if in someone smothering dream you too could pace behind the wagon. The wagon, this is the wagon that they take the dead soldiers in. that we flung him in, that we throw him in this wagon, okay? And watch the white eyes. Why white eyes? Because he's dead. His eyes is white in his face, and his hanging face like a devil sick of sin. So imagine this beautiful image that he compared the dead soldier to a devil sick of sin. Well, is the devil, or can the devil be sick of sin? The devil is the source of sin, but how can devil be sick of sin? And if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sore on an innocent tongue. And here he shows the symptoms that showed on the soldier when he smelled the gas, okay? If you could hear at every jolt the blood coming gargling from the froth corrupted lung. So simply the blood is coming out of his mouth, coming from his lung, because he smelled and he breathed the mustard gas. And that's why, the blood coming out of his mouth. Obscene as cancer, better as the cud. And that's so terrible. That is more terrible than cancer and the cud. And the last four lines are the most important lines. He said, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory, the old lie, de luce e decorum est, pro patria more. So simply he's saying that, my friends, if you read this poem, don't tell the young children or the soldiers, the young soldiers who want to fight in the war. Because as you know that most of the time, those who go to war are very young men, right? Like people from 18 to 24. So he calls them children. So he said, don't tell these children who want to fight in the war that there is some glory in the war. The war does not have glory. The war does not have desperate glory. You will not find glory, but you will find what? Death, killing, mustard gas, and all these crazy things. And then he said, you remember the title, De luce et decorum est? It is sweet to die for your country. He calls it the old lie. So the old lie is that to die, it is sweet to die for your own country. Now, if you compare this poem with the poem that we read before by Robert Brooke, they are totally opposites. The Robert Brooke poems talks about how glorious it is to die for your country, whereas Wilfred Owen talks about how inglorious and how terrible to fight for a war in the war for a long time. And he said that this is an old lie to say that it's sweet to die for your country. Okay, so the last poem, I don't know if it is long or not. If it is short, I will explain it. If it is, I think it is short. It is short, so I'll explain it quickly, okay? So the last poet, Sage Freight Sassoon, 1886 to 1967. Although Sassoon grew up in a family divided by religious differences, his father was Jewish, his mother Roman Catholic. His background provided him enough wealth to live comfortably. He attended Cambridge University for a while without taking a degree, preferring to live the life of a country gentleman, playing cricket and writing. Sassoon joined the British Army at the beginning of the World War I. He was sent home from the front twice, once when he contracted a fever and once for shell shock. This being the occasion when he met Wilfred Sassoon. Sassoon survived World War I and continued writing until his death. So there are two things here that you have to understand, is that Sassoon suffered from shell shock. He suffered from shell shock, okay, a psychological problem. And second, he survived the war. He did not die like Wilfred Owen. So that he was lucky. Okay. And his poem, Glory of Women. We will see what we mean by the glory of women. Again, the word glory, you feel like, the word glory is repeating all the time, whether the war is glorious or not glorious. Now, for Robert Brooks, the war is glorious, but for Wilfred Owen, the war is not glorious. Okay, you love us when we were heroes, home on leave, or wounded in a mentionable place. You worship decorations. You believe that chivalry redeems the war's disgrace. You make us shells. You listen with delight by tales of dirt and danger fondly thrilled. You crown our distant ardors while we fight and mourn our laurel memories when we are killed. You cannot believe that British troops retire when hell's last horror breaks them and they run, trembling the terrible corpses, blind with blood. O German mother, dreaming by the fire, while you are netting socks to send your son, his face is trodden deeper in the mud. Okay, now here you have to understand that the glory of women here refers to the fact that the people at home believe that the war is glorious. Why people at home believe that the war is glorious? Simply because they do not fight. Women do not fight, they stay at home. All people stay at home, children stay at home. So these people believe that the war is glorious simply because they don't have experience in the war. So they are waiting, the women are waiting their husbands and their sons to come back from the war, and they can celebrate their heroism and their patriotism. But what is the poet is saying here, or the speaker is saying here, is that this is not true. And here's the poem. You love us when we are hero, home on leave. So you like us when we become heroes fighting in the war, right? You love us. Wounded in a mentionable place. And you are happy when we are wounded. Okay, just wounded because, you know, we will be praised as heroes. Okay, he's wounded in the war. My son is wounded in the war. That's an honor. You worship decorations. Okay, means that you think that the decorations, by the way, the things that you get from the army when you serve for a long time. يعني بمعنى اللي هي الباجات أو الباجة أو الجائزة أو الشغلة اللي بتاخذها عشان مشاركتك بالحرب. فكل ما بتشارك بالحرب بعطوك زي باجة هيك زي شعار واسم إنه والله إنك أنت شاركت في الحرب لفترة طويلة إلى آخره. فهو بيحكي إنه النساء هذول you worship decorations. You believe that the chivalry redeems the war's disgrace. Chivalry is the word that has to do with bravery, with the soldier, okay? So women believe that being brave, being hero, this is good, and this will redeem the war's grace, okay? And this is not true. He's meaning the opposite, by the way. You make us shells. You let us, you know, shells means that you make us fight the other people and kill other people. You make us shells. You listen with delight by tales of deaths and dangers fondly thrilled. And here, when we go back home, you are happy to listen to our stories. When we talk about our dirt and danger, fondly thrilled, you become very happy when you listen to our stories in the war, that we were in danger and that we were in the mud, you know, having all kinds of problems. You crown our distant ardor while we fight and mourn our lurid memories when we were killed. So here, he said, if we go back after we fight, you crown our distance with ardors. Okay, simply that you celebrate our bravery and chivalry. But when we die, you mourn our memories. When we die, you mourn. You know what mourn is? Is that when someone dies, that you cry for him, that you mourn our memories when we are killed. So simply, if we survive, you will be happy and you will celebrate our heroism. But when we die, you cry on us. You can't believe that the British troops retire when hell's last horror breaks them and they run. This is very important because he said, you cannot understand why some British soldiers retire. Why retire means that they leave the war. Like Sage Fred Sassoon, he left the war because he has a shell shock. He has a psychological problem because of the war. Okay, but people at home do not understand why these soldiers left the war. And he said, when hell's last horror breaks them. So simply the war breaks soldiers and they run. So soldiers run out of death. They don't want to die. Soldiers are scared and are afraid of death. So they run. But these things as being afraid, retiring and running out of the war, they are not good words for women at home, because women want you to fight. Women want you to be brave and glorious and patriotic. But the reality is that the soldiers at home, in the war see something else. They don't want to fight. They want to retire. They want to break. And they are breaking because of the horror. And they also want to run out of the war. And that's why the soldier, you know, shows how the difference between women at home and soldiers who are fighting in the war. Trampling the terrible corpses, blind with the blood. These are the soldiers, you know, walking through the corpses or the dead bodies, blind and with blood. You remember the word blind in the previous poem? Also, you know, the idea that you are blind because simply you are fighting for a long time, you cannot sleep, and that makes you blind. And also you are blind because of the explosions that, you know, occur near to you. When you have an explosion, you cannot see for some time, you become blind and with blood. And here the speaker goes to the German mother. Oh, German mother, dreaming by the fire, while you are netting socks to send your son, his face is trodden deeper in the mud. And he said that the German mother, who's, you know, knitting socks, you know, she's making socks for her son who's fighting in the war, but she does not know the reality of her son, that her son is dead, his face trodden deeper in the mud, that or her son is in a terrible situation, that he is not in a good situation. But what she's doing, she is sitting by the fire at her house knitting socks, but she does not know what her son is facing. Okay, so to conclude for this poem simply talks about, you know, two things. The first thing is that we have people at home who believe that the war is glorious, patriotic, and nationalistic, like these mothers and these women. And there are soldiers who fight in the war, like Wilfred Owen and Sassoon, and they think that the war is very terrible, and they break, they run, and they don't want to stay in the war because the war is terrible. The war is death, the war is blindness, the war is sleeplessness, and the war is shell shock and psychological problems. So before the war was glorious, but after the war becomes very terrible and cannot be understood. So that's all for today's, you know, presentation about the war poets. Hopefully this will, you know, make clear the poems that I'm attaching here. Please read them carefully and listen to this and watch this presentation. Thank you very much, guys, for listening, and have a wonderful day.